Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have His Holiness Jaiadvaita Swami Maharaj with us today. He's going to be speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. If you have questions, write something in the chat board or raise hand. We want it to be interactive and lively. Please contribute, don't be shy. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Give me one moment. Right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam 9:15-12 and onward. Satrabhut sumahat punya koshaki lokapavani reno sutam renukam vai dramadognir uvahayam tasyam vai bhargavarishe sutta vasumadadayaha yaviyan jagya etesham Ram ityavi vishrutaha. Satyavati later became the sacred river Kaushiki to purify the entire world, and her son Jamadagni married Renuka, the daughter of Renu. By the semen of Jamadagni, many sons, headed by Vasuman, were born from the womb of Renuka. The youngest of them was named Rama, or Parashurama. Yamahur Vasudevang Sham Haihayanam Pulantakam Tri Sapta Kritvoya Imam Chakre Nisat Nikshatriyam Mahim. Learned scholars accept this Parshuram as the celebrated incarnation of Vasudeva, who annihilated the dynasty of Kartavirya. Parshuram killed all the Kshatriyas on earth 21 times. Driptam kshatram bhuvo param abramanyam aninashat rajastamo vritam ahan palgunyapi kritem asi. Prabhuji, you might not want to share that screen with us all as you're working with the studio and the content. Thank you. When the royal dynasty, being excessively proud because of the material modes of passion and ignorance, became irreligious and ceased to care for the laws enacted by the Brahmanas, Parshuram killed them. Although their offense was not very severe, he killed them to lessen the burden of the world. Purport: the Kshatriyas, or the ruling class, must govern the world in accordance with the rules and regulations enacted by great Brahmanas and saintly persons. As soon as the ruling class becomes irresponsible in regard to the religious principles, it becomes a burden on the earth. As stated here, Rajastamo Vritang Param Abramanyam. When the ruling class is influenced by the lower modes of nature, namely ignorance and passion, it becomes a burden to the world and must then be annihilated by superior power. We actually see from modern history that monarchies have been abolished by various revolutions. But unfortunately, the monarchies have been abolished to establish the supremacy of third-class and fourth-class men. Although monarchies overpowered by the modes of passion and ignorance have been abolished in the world, the inhabitants of the world are still unhappy. For although the qualities of the former monarchs were degraded by taints of ignorance, these monarchs have been replaced by men of the mercantile and worker classes, whose qualities are even more degraded. When the government is actually guided by brahmanas or God-conscious men, then there can be real happiness. Real happiness for the people. Therefore, in previous times, when the ruling class was degraded to the modes of passion and ignorance, the brahmanas, headed by such a kshatriya spirited brahmin as Parshuram, killed them 21 consecutive times. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurn Miditam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadhati Shapadantikam Pandehang Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamalang Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Shahagana Raganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kamshana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vanchako Patarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vashali Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We find that here the Anksha portion of Vasudeva, the personality of Godhead, appeared as Parshuram to diminish the bhuvaparam, the burden of the earth, in the form of the Kshatriyas who were puffed up, driptam, and a Brahmanyam, not guided by Brahminical advice. The Kshatriyas are supposed to be the second tier of society. They provide protection and exercise power, but they're supposed to do so under the guidance of the top tier, those who have spiritual vision, the Brahmins. When the Kshatriyas become puffed up and just disregard Brahminical vision, then they become a burden on the earth, like arms that are flailing senselessly without the direction of the head. So that occurs. We find the opening words of the Krishna book. Once the world was overburdened by the unnecessary defense force of supposed kings who were not actually qualified. So that happens. We see that there were so many kings who became degraded. The king is supposed to be the representative of Krishna, Naranam Chandaradhipam. But when the king thinks that everything is for my enjoyment, then he becomes irresponsible. He's supposed to be very responsible, protecting the citizens and the country on behalf of the Supreme Lord and seeing that everyone is engaged properly in prescribed duties. But when he neglects his own prescribed duty for the sense of sense gratification, then he becomes a burden. Srila Prabhupada remarks that the monarchs were tainted by passion and ignorance, so they were overthrown by popular revolutions. But the revolutions just institute something worse than the monarchs themselves, so-called democracy or so-called republican form of government, in which, or a so-called government of the people or government of the workers, in which the Vaishyas and Shudras take charge, the third and fourth class men, third and fourth tier of society. So then you get ignorance predominant, passion predominant. With passion and ignorance going on in this way, the whole society becomes degraded. The purpose of the society, according to the Vaishyas, or in the vision of the Vaishyas, is simply economic prosperity. If the bottom line of the government of the economy is good, then everything is good, regardless of how we got it there, regardless of the happiness of the people, regardless of prescribed duties. If we're making money, then things are good. So they look at it like a business, and a degraded business like that, a degraded business at that. So, and the Shudras, when they take charge, they're still lower in their vision. When these low-grade men take charge, they'll do anything for sense gratification. And Prabhupada said that twice, and he said, they'll do anything. They'll do anything. So, all right. In Kali Yuga, as stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Dasyu Prayeshu Rajasu, the ruling class, Rajanya, will be no better than plunderers, Dasyus, because the third class and fourth class men will monopolize the affairs of the government. Dasyu means not a pickpocket, but a plunderer, the kind of person who beats you up and takes your money. Dasyu. Ignoring the religious principles and Brahminical rules and regulations, they will certainly try to plunder the riches of the citizens without consideration. They'll have different schemes. They'll take your money to go to the moon. They'll take your money to go to Mars. They'll take your money to fight terrorism. They'll take your money in the name of public health. One way or another, they'll take your money and use it for sense gratification. As stated elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, asamskrita priya hina rajasa tamasa vrataha prajaste bhakshayashyanti lechcha rajanyarupinaha. Being unpurified, neglecting to discharge human duties properly, and being influenced by the modes of passion, rajas, and ignorance, tamas, unclean people, lechas, posing as members of the government, Rajanurupinha will swallow the citizens. Prajaste Bhakshayishyanti. They'll eat you alive. Bhakshayishyanti. They'll suck out everything they can from your life. Asanskrita, unpurified, uncultured, kriyahina, without proper, acting properly. Rajasa tamasavrata, covered over by ignorance and passion. They'll just devour the citizens while posing as responsible government leaders. And in still another place, Srimad Bhagavatam says, Evam prajabhir dushtabhir akirne kshiti mandale brahmavid kshatra shudranam yobali pavita nripaha prajahi lubthai rajanyar nigranayar dasyudharamabhi achchinna dada dravina yasyanti girikananam. Human society is naturally grouped into 4 divisions, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Chaturvarnyam maya shrishtam gunakarma vibhagasha. But if this system is neglected and the qualities and divisions of society are not considered, the result will be Brahmavit Kshatra Shudranam Yo Bali Pavita Nripaha. The so-called caste system of Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra will be meaningless. As a result, whoever somehow or other becomes powerful will be the king or president, and thus the prajas or citizens will be so harassed that they'll give up hearth and home and go to the forest. Yasyanti Girikananam, to escape harassment by government officials who have no mercy and are addicted to the ways of plunderers. This is not mythology or some sort of hyperbole. This is a fact. As the rulers of the world become more and more degraded, they plunder the citizens mercilessly. They exploit. They'll do anything. And we see that in other countries. We all recognize that perhaps in African countries or in some Asian countries, these despots take charge and then they shamelessly exploit. They outright steal from the people. They bump off their opponents, just terminate them, assassinate them. They have all sorts of schemes for just channeling money out of the state treasury into their own pockets and the pockets of their friends. They sell out their governments for the sake of payments from big corporations or foreign countries or whoever pays them, they'll serve and prostitute their countries. These things are known. We see that in the third world, in Latin America, and in Africa, elsewhere. And of course, we think that in our country or in America and Europe, we're more civilized. That sort of thing would never happen here. But of course, more civilized simply means we're more polished about it, that we're more sophisticated, and perhaps even more ambitious, that we're so good at it that we don't bother with the petty little things, a $10 bribe here, a 20 rupee bribe there. We steal on the grand scale, on the scale of billions and billions and billions. And we do it through various kinds of schemes. So this is going on, and it will become, and tax and tax and tax. The taxes become so oppressive that finally people, they'll just go off to the forest. They'll just say, enough of this. I can't bear this. I can't live like this. This is inhuman. And they'll think that the forest is better than so-called civilization, where they just suck my blood. So people will flee to the mountains. They'll flee to the forests. And of course, the government agents will track them down because they're now antisocial elements, or they're communists, or they're Maoists, or they're fascists, or they're this, or to call a dog a bad name and hang him. One way or another, they'll chase down the citizens and fight against their own citizens for the sin of being insubordinate to the benevolent government in which the leaders ensconce themselves as enjoyers. Now, this is Kali Yuga. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. It doesn't get better, it gets worse. Therefore, the prajas, or the people in general, must take to the Krishna consciousness movement, the Hare Krishna movement, which is the sound incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Kali Kale Namarupe Krishna Avatar. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has now appeared as an incarnation by his holy name. Therefore, when the prajas become Krishna conscious, they can then expect a good government and good society, a perfect life, and liberation from the bondage of material existence. Kirtanadeva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Prajet. The only good thing in Kali Yuga is the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, which comes from the spiritual platform. So Srila Prabhupada is pointing us in that direction. Even taking shelter of the forest doesn't solve our problem. One has to take shelter of the holy name of Krishna. Abhinnatam Nama Namino, there's no difference between Krishna and Krishna's holy name. So when we take shelter of the holy name of Krishna, then we're taking shelter of Krishna, and our situation is all right. Otherwise, we become the victims of our minds, we become victims of our senses, we become afflicted by the punishments of material nature, and we become cruelly exploited by so-called leaders who don't mind doing anything sinful, that's any sinful scheme for sense gratification. What is that? Idam maya labdham imam prapse manorutam idam astidam api me bhavishyati punardanam. I've gotten so much money now, I'll get more according to my schemes. These are my enemies, I've killed them, I'll kill my other enemies. I'm perfect, I'm powerful, I'm happy. So I'll give some charity, I'll do some welfare work, and I'll enjoy. Ityajnana vimohita. This way they're thoroughly bewildered. And such bewildered men, they're not only bewildered, but they're dangerously bewildered. To be bewildered is all right, not very good for the bewildered person. But when the bewildered fools take charge of the government, then they become vicious, they become unscrupulous, they engage in horrible, destructive works. What is that? Prabhavanti Uga Karmana Kshayaya Jagato Hitaha. They involve themselves in research, scientific research. What is the scientific research? How to build atomic weapons, how to build other kinds of weapons, bioweapons, gain of function, all sorts of vicious and dangerous activities, which are not meant to make society better, which are not meant to give us a better world. They're simply meant for pandemonium. All right, are there some questions, some comments? Let's see, let me move my screen over a little bit. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I wonder if there's some thoughts or questions bubbling up there someplace. Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Krishna, 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 Krishna. Srila Prabhupada saw in his time how the government could be so unscrupulous. There was, he mentioned, an artificial famine created in Bengal by the government, the then British government, simply for spite and for political and economic advantage. And they didn't care. Thousands of people, let them die, let them die. Prabhupada said that. We thought this was sort of, perhaps we thought this was sort of a, an Indian's view of history. I saw a few years ago, a book was published on the subject, a scholarly book, basically confirming Srila Prabhupada's assessment of what had happened with that famine. They don't mind doing these things. There's been some other histories about the exploitation in Africa. Oh, if you go back to like when Congo was owned by the Belgians, King Leopold, who just made it his property and didn't care how many thousands and thousands and thousands of African people died in the service of increasing his wealth. This is mainline history, by the way. It's not some sort of conspiracy theory. This is mainline history. And similarly, in recent decades, same thing has been going on. In Africa, so many vicious things go on for the sake of profit of foreign powers. Africa is a continent cursed with natural resources. So the foreign powers get in there and one way or another exploit, and viciously. Viciously. They don't mind creating, not only don't mind, it's stock in trade to create civil wars, to create tribal conflicts, so that you can step in and bring peace to the region by taking over. This is so standard that it's hardly, what can we say? It's almost, it's just standard. This is what we do. As Prabhupada said, divide and rule. Divide doesn't mean just divide, but it means create vicious conflicts among people, and then you come in and solve the problem. It's also called the strategy of tension, by the way. La strategia della tensione. So we do these things. We do these things. As demons, we do these things, and we don't mind. We find justifications, we find rationalizations, we find popular explanations about how we're doing this for the sake of, it's interesting to see that, for democracy, for peace, for freedom, for human rights. I've seen it lately go on in the name of women's rights. We invade a region steal all the resources, project power, military power into the area, and then say that we're doing this for the sake of women's rights. Because that's acceptable. Women's rights that's a good cause, to give women a chance for a decent life. Yes, that's good. We can't really say, well, we're doing this so that we can mop up millions and billions of dollars worth of local resources and thrust our armies and navies into the area. That wouldn't fly. But for women's rights, oh yes, we'll do that. So under popular guises, we do vicious things. And this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, which I confess years ago I thought was maybe just a little bit hyperbolic, a little painting things with a broad brush, tells exactly what's going on in the world. It's not even a pinch of, there's not even a pinch of exaggeration there. This is what we do. For our sense gratification, we do anything. We do anything. And these are not just the kind of demons you see in Bollywood. Ha ha ha, oh ho ho, or in ISKCON plays sometimes, the Hiranyakashipus. These are highly educated, sophisticated, capable demons. Govindadas says, no question around the poor quality and corruption of leadership. But as it pertains to science, should we not acknowledge also that there are parts that are also to benefit humanity? Yeah, there are parts that also are to benefit humanity, but parts. And we'll give them that. There's parts that are beneficial. But, who pays for science? Who's paying for science? You want to know, whose benefit this is being done for. Any project, a park, a subway, a bridge, a factory. Who's paying for it? So who's paying for science? The military, above all, hugely. We're not talking about slightly edging out other interests, hugely. Their money is being spent as part of the military budget. Let's take a case in point within our present day experience and consciousness. Research on viruses is not just being done by laboratories who are busy looking for vaccines and cures and ways to help people. There are laboratories in various parts of the world who are working on how to make these viruses worse. The technical name is gain of function. And what that means is how to take a virus and make it do something more than it does now. How to adapt it so that it will be specifically targeted for human beings. How to make it more pernicious, more vicious. I'm not, speaking from some sort of weird, fanatical internet pseudo-knowledge. This is stuff published in scholarly literature, in professional literature, in medical literature. This work is being done by whoever has the money to pay for it, which is not the Taliban, for example. It's not that the Taliban is busy doing viral enhancement. You have to be a big player for that, and there's not too many of them. Angel says, we are all first, previously. Okay, let me scroll up. Nimai Dasi, what is our responsibility as devotees under these various governments? Surely we need to take choices. And while we are only here temporarily, how involved do we want to get in government activities? That's a very good question. And it's a difficult question. At the moment, the answer is let's stay out of this stuff. Because what can we do? We're powerless or next to powerless. We ourselves are not yet so well organized that we're ready to take over governments. If we can manage our own little temple very well, that's a landmark achievement. So we need to get a little better at these things ourselves. And we're simply not in the position to even think about, taking power or having a great influence in government affairs. Apart from that, it can enormously distract one's attention. If you want to get into all the ins and outs of what the government is doing and finding out and trying to counteract and all of this, you'll waste your whole life. You can waste your whole life just because there's no end to it. You pull the thread and there's more and there's more and there's more and there's more. There's no limit to how deep these demonic dealings go. There is a limit somewhere, but we can't find it. There's so many nasty things going on, so much profiteering going on at the state level. My father had his business on a long avenue in New Jersey, which was dotted by towns. Every 10 blocks or something like that on this avenue, it would be a different town, different municipality. And my father used to say that it was just so that they could have different officials collecting graft. And yeah, that was sort of his opinion as a businessman. But then looking back on it some years later, I found out that area of New Jersey is notorious for this kind of thing. Absolutely notorious, like New York Times notorious. Mayors are always getting, hauled into court and prosecuted for grand scale larceny and so on. And this is just, little municipalities where people in passion and ignorance take charge. So what happens when such people take charge of state governments and then national governments and international alliances and so on? It gets very, very nasty. But, and as Nimai says, we're all impacted by these decisions. We are. But therefore, the best thing for us is mukta sangha paramvrajet, to get out of material existence altogether and go back to Godhead, and to bring as many others with us. Prabhupada talks about, in the purport it's there'll be good government when people are Krishna conscious. So our role at this point is to make people Krishna conscious, simply to try for political adjustment, political action, political force or power at this point is unrealistic and unrealistic and distracting. But if we focus on making people Krishna conscious, they will demand Krishna conscious leadership. That's the approach that Srila Prabhupada seems to take in his purports again and again. that make people Krishna conscious. When they're Krishna conscious, they'll wake up and say, we're being cheated by these businessmen and thieves who are Rajanurupina, who are posing as leaders, but who are abramanya, who have no spiritual qualities, who are unwilling to take guidance from those who are spiritually advanced. So that would be, and all right, if someone, yes, that would be our focus. If we get more, of course, we probably, so we don't want to take over the government, we want to advise the government. So we should become qualified for that. They're in passion and ignorance. Even Kshatriyas, real Kshatriyas, are in passion. There needs to be a section who are advanced in goodness or spiritual advancement. That's our focus. Angel to everyone. It's nice to have an angel to everyone. Thank you for reminding me of how my mind can drive me to illness or poor decisions. I really appreciate how the Vedas maintain us. The mind can drive us to sickness. Nature is science. The Vedas maintain us healthy. Yes, that's a fact. If one chants Hare Krishna and follows simply a regulated life, what is that? In the Bhagavad Gita, that Yukta har viharascha yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnava bodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. Just by living a regulated life, one can get free from miseries. One doesn't need, drugstores full of remedies for this and remedies for that and remedies for this and remedies for that. If we live a regulated life, that much only, we'll be so much healthier. If you walked to the drugstore instead of driving there, you would improve your health. Just walking is so. Prabhupada did those two things, massage and walking. Those were his two primary health initiatives in his old age. Walking every day and taking massage every day. And apart from that, regulated diet, regulated way of life, and little Ayurvedic medicine. So the world is, people want to smoke, drink, eat abominable things, have sex like cats and dogs, and then take medicine to save them from the consequences, to be healthy. They want an integral lifestyle of meat eating, gambling, whoring, and natural medicine. Come on. I was talking yesterday with a devotee that was saying how India's different branches of Hinduism are being exploited by the governments in a way that, instead of bringing them together, tries to divide them and pit them against one another. This, he found, could be a risk even in ISKCON. So instead of preaching to Shivaists that Krishna is the only supreme personality of Godhead, ISKCON should focus more on atheists who are really dangerous in government positions and want to divide other people due to different beliefs. What do you think about it? I think that's not what Prabhupada had in mind, that in the interest that people, the different strands of Hinduism are being exploited. So we should just sort of fall in line and say, yes, you're Hindu, you're good. You're worshiping Shiva, fine. You're worshiping Durga, fine. You're worshiping the impersonal absolute, fine. You're sacrificing goats to Kali, fine. It's all the same. Then we'll have one happy family. No. Sarvadharman Paratyaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. ISKCON is not meant for national integration and all of that. It's meant for delivering the message of Krishna. And Krishna doesn't say yatamat tatapad. He doesn't say whatever you think is good. He says ma'amekam sharanam praja. So that devotee may have his point of view. It's a fact the government will pit different Hindu factions against one another, Hindus against Muslims, Muslims against Christians, Hindus against Muslims and Christians, everyone against everyone else. Or they'll, it's silly. So many of these things are pretexts, like India, Pakistan. I'm not into politics, but this is like so elementary that it serves as an example. We always hear that there's this tremendous conflict between India and Pakistan over Kashmir because the Hindus want to, and the Muslims are fighting over who should be ascendant. It's basically a Hindu-Muslim conflict. That's what Kashmir is. And so, India says, well, let's do this, and Pakistan says, let's do that. But it's all about Hindu-Muslim conflict. And this is 100% bunk. It's 100% bunk. If you look at geography, that's where you start when you want to understand politics. You look at geography. What does geography tell us? It tells us that Pakistan, for its water, depends on rivers flowing through Kashmir. And therefore, Pakistan is always worried that India may cut off its water supply. We live by water. And if the water is controlled by India, then we're controlled by India. Therefore, Kashmir is crucial. And we cook up this stuff about Hindu, Muslim. Both sides do it. But it's not about Hinduism and Islam. It's about resources. Middle East, same story. It's all about terrorism and, no, resources. So, yes, it's true that governments do these things, but our job is not to, figure out who to side with or how to get along with everybody or how to appear middle of the road or how to be with the government that's most favorable for Sanatan Dharma, or how to be this or how to be that. Our business is to speak the truth, as found in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. That is our business, and not just to be seen as nice guys who are helping everybody get along because we're good folks. That's not our job. Let's see, I see 6 new messages. Thank you. Oh, that is easy. Those messages don't make me go over time. Okay, so these, again, politics is not our field, although it is when Krishna's involved, when the Kauravas and the Pandavas are fighting, then we're very interested in politics. Otherwise, the general contemporary political landscape is only on the periphery of our vision, just off on the corners. Our focal point should be the lotus feet of the personality of God. If we lose that focus, then Maya catches us. Yes, you have to work for the equality of these people and those people. Yes, you have to work to get rid of these exploiters. Yes, you have to do this, you have to do that. You have to be very concerned about this, very concerned about that. You have to do research about that. You need to know what's going on about this. You have to uncover this and counteract that and convince people of this and straighten out that and all on the mundane platform. That will not help us. That will be Maya's trick. Why should you read Srimad Bhagavatam? Why should you chant Hare Krishna? Why should you focus your mind on Krishna all the time when these very important things are going on, when the demons are doing this? And then our minds become absorbed in the activities of the demons and we forget the lotus feet of Krishna. So we shouldn't be blind. Prabhupada was aware of such things and he sometimes commented on such things. But if we become absorbed in such things, then we become absorbed in Maya. And then our life is spoiled. And it's very powerful. Mama Maya Durataya, Daivihesha Gunamaya. Maya is very powerful and has so many ways of sucking us in and justifying that, yes, you need to be, give attention to this, you need to give attention to that. Click, 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 click. We should be very careful to guard our Krishna consciousness against incursions and intrusions by the illusory energy. Putana appears as a very attractive woman. And Maya disguises herself in the form of so many other things. Social activism, vegetarianism, philanthropy, justice, so many things. So we have to keep, what is that? Ekeha Gurunandana. Bahushaka Hinantascha Bhutayo Vyavasayana. We have to be careful not to allow our intelligence to be diverted by Maya's tricks. Ekeha Gurunandana. We should remain focused on the lotus feet of Krishna. All right, I've gone a few minutes over time. I think we can stop here. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very, very much. Thank you everyone for your questions, for coming on. I'll see you next time. Thank you. Have a wonderful day in Krishna consciousness.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.